Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name's Elise and today I'm going to be going over my top 10 reads from 2025. I do have to say before I jump into my favorites that 2025 was a little bit of a flop for me. I came off of 2024 having read 150 books and I really wanted to continue that in 2025. I had a really strong first half of the year, and then once I hit about July, things kind of took a turn for the worse and I felt like the rest of my reading year was kind of a dud. I still had some 5 stars, I still had some books I really enjoyed, but I think I started really pushing for quantity over quality and trying to hit the number and sticking it out with some duds or picking up books because they were short, as opposed to just not worrying about the number and spending some quality time with books that were more anticipated or that I knew I would like a little bit better that I had maybe avoided just because I thought that they would take longer. I also did have some additional stress in my personal life in the second half of the year that I think definitely lent itself to just a decrease in motivation. And so that slowed down my reading speed a lot, which then was an endless cycle of, well, my reading slowed down, so now I need to read more short books, so now I'm picking up more books that I don't actually care about. And I think 2026 is going to be a better reading year. I have a lot more quality focused goals, and I'm actually not giving myself a number goal at all this year, which feels kind of strange because I'm very motivated by that, but I think that it's kind of freeing not having a number goal for the year because it lets me just read what I read. Some fun stats about the year of 2025 is I did reach 135 books with my goal being 145. So 10 off from my goal isn't too bad. I did also have a goal to finish at least 3 series and I think I finished around 5. So that's another goal that I'm glad I hit. And I had some high priority series like Mistborn that I was able to finish and The Broken Kingdoms by N.K. Jemisin, the Inheritance trilogy that I was able to make progress in. I did also save almost $3,000 using my library this year, and that's always a really motivating number and something I'm really proud of. I didn't read as much of my physical TBR as I would have liked. I read 32 books off of my physical TBR, so my goal for this year is definitely to get some of the books you see behind me read. I would love to be someone that really only reads from the library aside from books that I want to annotate. And so I think that's another focus I have for 2026 is just not really buying books and continuing to be a library patron. So complaints about 2025 as a reading year out of the way, I do want to jump right into my top 10. These are mostly ordered. I would say my top 3 could probably switch around on any given day, but 10 through 4 are pretty locked into their ranking. Okay, so now into my official top 10 of the year. In my number 10 spot, I have The Details. The Details is a short literary fiction translation all about how the details of the people we love transform us into who we are. That's really the best explanation I can give. It's not a very plot-focused book, but it is a book with absolutely beautiful writing, beautiful quotes on love and it has a lot of really heartwarming lines just about the love of books and the love of reading. And something I really appreciated about this book is that it focused on non-romantic love in addition to romantic love. It's only about 3 chapters long, but it really fits a lot into quite a short book. And I think why this one sticks out is it was a short book that I picked up because I wanted to read it, not just because it was a short book. This is a book that I've waxed poetic about in 1 or 2 other videos, so I won't harp on it too much, but if you love a book with beautiful writing and reflections on all types of relationships, then I think you would really love The Details. In my number 9 spot is actually a recent read, and this is Saint Catherine. This is a graphic novel about our main character, Catherine, who grew up Catholic and grew up going to Mass and being very involved in Catholicism with her family. And now in her adult life, she still goes to church every Sunday, but she's not quite sure why because she doesn't really know what her faith is in her life. Her friends kind of lovingly poke fun at her for going but not knowing why she's going. And they do really encourage her that she can go to church if she wants to, but she also doesn't have to go if she doesn't want to. One day she does make the decision to skip Sunday Mass and she goes to an abandoned cemetery, I think, with her boyfriend. And while they're there, she breaks an altar and becomes possessed by a demon.
I, on the other hand, have been having the worst day of my life and I owe it all to skipping church.
If that description doesn't tell you enough, this book is one giant metaphor for Catholic guilt. And as someone who grew up Catholic and then kind of left Catholicism and then kind of came back, I found this book relatable and comforting in a lot of ways. I don't want to get too personal about my personal beliefs or faith or religion or anything like that, but this book was really comforting because you could see how her connection to Catholicism was a comfort for her and did at times drive her to want to be a good person, but it also held her back at times and made her feel like everything she did was wrong or she could never do anything quite good enough. So I just thought that the way the story was told was a really interesting reflection of kind of the inner turmoil that comes with shame associated with any religion or any faith. I thought it had a beautiful art style, and I think it really was a case of right book, right place, right time, and right reader. I picked it up on a night where I was home alone after work, and I read it in one sitting and just kind of wept because I simultaneously wanted to reach into the book and give Catherine a hug, but I also felt really seen by her at times and really comforted by the fact that it's okay to still be figuring out how a faith that you grew up with but has also changed and you've changed can make sense in your life. Number 8 on my list was an anticipated release of the year, and it was Oathbound by Tracy Deonn. I can't say too much about the plot of this book because it's the third in a series, but it's the third book in the Legendborn series, and we follow our main character Bree, who is a high school student entering a early college type of program at North Carolina. Very early on to this program, she discovers that she can see things that no one else can, these creatures and this magic, and she gets kind of brought into a secret society that she might not normally have joined. I really love Bree as a main character. I think she feels really 16 in that she feels young and like she's learning, but she's not an annoying teenager or teenage voice to follow. I think that she has so much depth and she feels true to age while also being a character that I think young adults and adults can relate to. I really liked seeing her growth in this book. I think she's a character that often feels like she has to take things on alone, and as each book has developed, we see her accept help and kind of accept community more and more, even if she still has some resistance to it or some feelings like no one else should be responsible for the things that she has to fix. I did miss some characters that we see in other books in Oathbound, which is why maybe this is number 8 instead of higher on the list, but I did love one character in particular that I am a big fan of was back in this book. We missed a lot of him in book 2, so I was really happy to see him and Bree get to interact more. And I felt like we got a lot of depth added to his character. I will be patiently awaiting whenever book 4 comes out, and maybe I'll reread the series between then, because every book in Legendborn series has been a 5-star for me. This is a series I hold so dear, and I just love it so much. Number 7 in this list is a new book series that I started at the beginning of the year and was able to continue in November of this year, and that is The Will of the Many by James Islington. This book follows our main character, Vis, who is essentially at the bottom of a hierarchical society, and he gets taken in by someone who's quite a few tiers up to go undercover at a university and not only get to the top and be the #1 student here, but to simultaneously uncover some of the secrets that are seemingly hidden. That's all I really want to say about The Will of the Many. If you're in any type of book space, you've probably heard so many people talk about this book and its sequel, The Strength of the Few, but this really is just such a special series. Book 1 feels very Roman inspired in its setting, and while it's a magic system, it does feel a little sci-fi at times, which I think can be fun. I think because we see how the magic influences technology, that's what makes me feel like it has a sci-fi flair, even though it is magic at the end of the day. I love Vis as a main character in this series. I feel like he is someone who we see him met with setbacks quite often, and we see him overcome them through his intelligence or his strength or his determination, sometimes other people's determination for him to keep going. And I think that that's really unique, that to me, it never feels like his solutions are handed to him. It feels like he really works to get everything he accomplishes. And I really enjoyed how in book 2, Vis was able to explore different motivations that he has. He feels really torn between never wanting to subject himself to the hierarchy's society, but also feeling a responsibility to the people he's now met and loves in the system. He simultaneously wants to fight for what's right and take down oppressors, but he also just wants to run away and never think about his problems again and live a peaceful life. This series feels really unique in the magic system, in the world, and I personally have never read anything like it before. So if you're a fan of fantasy, especially ones that have a good level of mystery along the way, then you should definitely check out The Will of the Many. In my number 6 spot, I actually have a nonfiction, and it's called A Story of a Murder. I had never heard of this book before this year, and I watched a video by Meg with Books, and she raved about it, so I decided to pick it up. I'm not normally someone who's drawn to historical leaning stories, but I am someone who is drawn to crime stories, especially in nonfiction, when I feel like we're really getting to hear the side of the victims. And this was a really, really fascinating story. So this is the true story of a murder that took place in the early 1900s, where a woman named Belle Elmore was murdered by her husband. I'm referencing a synopsis because I forget some of the specific details like names and years, even though I remember the overarching story, and they don't say his first name, but he goes by Dr. Crippen. She was murdered by Dr. Crippen and his mistress, who then fled but were subsequently caught. However, in the trial, Dr. Crippen and his mistress really had a control of the narrative and used that to taint Belle's reputation or try and get off more easily. So the author Hallie Rubenfeld did really excellent research to tell the story of Belle, as well as Dr. Crippen's previous wives that he did not treat well either. If you're someone who likes a mystery thriller book and wants to dive your toes into nonfiction, this would definitely be a nonfiction that I would describe as reads like a fiction book. It felt like we really got to learn about who each person involved was, and we had a really great understanding about the roles that they played and who they were as people. It felt almost action-packed in a way, and like the mystery was unraveling with every chapter. It was well written, well researched, and despite it being one of the longer books I picked up this year, I felt gripped the whole way through. I never felt like it was lagging or like I needed it to wrap up. At times the story felt dramatic, but at the end of the day, the author does a really great job of really bringing justice to the victims. While there was justice in the court of law, she does a great job of bringing Belle to life and being able to kind of create a new story for her outside of just being a victim of a crime. In my number 5 spot, I have another series that I continued, and that is book 2 in the Farseer trilogy, Royal Assassin by Robin Hobb. The Farseer trilogy follows Fitzchivalry Farseer, who is the bastard son of the king-in-waiting Chivalry Farseer. He is brought to the castle when he is just 6 years old and taken under the wing of a few different people who work for the king, namely so he can be raised as a kingsman and be an assassin. What I love about the Farseer trilogy so far is how slow-paced it is. It gives us so much time to develop an understanding of the character and the politics in the world, and so I feel like when the moments of action happen in the book, we have such an innate understanding of who's involved and why these things are happening, and the twists make sense, but we never could have predicted them. The ending of this book genuinely had me flabbergasted. I had no idea where book 3 was gonna go, and I jumped into it right away. Haven't finished it yet. That's another reflection of the year. But I've been having so much fun annotating these books and really taking my time with them and savoring the read. I really love Fitz as a character, and I really felt for him in this book. He gets pulled in so many different directions, and you can see him trying to follow his instincts but doubting himself, and that made for a really interesting setup for his character in book 3. So I'm really loving continuing on in this series, and this was my number 5 book of the year. Okay, my number 4 book of the year is another nonfiction, and it is Hidden Valley Road. Hidden Valley Road is a nonfiction story that follows the Galvin family from roughly the 40s through the 60s. And this was a family living in Colorado that had 12 children, 6 of which were diagnosed with schizophrenia. This book follows the lives of the family from the time the parents were married, as well as a little bit of their background through the late 60s with the family, as well as some modern interviews with some of the living siblings. This book shows us what schizophrenia treatment and perception was like at a time where it was a really misunderstood illness. That's not to say it's an understood illness nowadays, because there is still a lot of medical mystery surrounding the disease, but at the time there really was insufficient treatment and response. If you've seen that meme that's like trying to hang at the function, but I can't help but notice the thin veil of misogyny that seeps into everything, that's how I felt about this book, because there were so many instances of them being like, well, of course this person has schizophrenia. It's because he has an overbearing mother. Something that I really appreciated about this book is that it never felt like we were pointing the finger and oohing and eyeing at these people with a really serious mental illness. It never felt like they were trying to tell this salacious stories and let me give you these details of this person doing these cuckoo crazy things. It felt really respectful of the victims, and it really only shared details of their hallucinations, be that visual, auditory, delusions of grandeur. It really only shared those details when it was necessary to tell the next step of the story. Something else that was really interesting about this book is it highlighted the impact on the siblings that did not have schizophrenia. Just because they didn't have this diagnosis doesn't mean they weren't impacted by their siblings having this diagnosis. This book was so well researched. It was fascinating. This is very telling, but again, it's one of the longer books I read this year, and I could have read even more of it. If you want a really compelling history on the field of psychology, specifically following schizophrenia, that gives you familial anecdotes, but also paints a picture of what the medical landscape was like in a non-boring way. I felt like I was able to comprehend everything that was being told to me, and I really felt like I learned a lot about schizophrenia. Okay, we are officially up to my top 3 reads of the year. The order of these 3 can change given the day, but this is the order I'm ranking them in today. So my loose number 3 book of the year is Wild Dark Shore by Charlotte McConaghy. Wild Dark Shore follows a father and his 3 children living on a remote island in Oceania with essentially the last remaining species of a bunch of plants. Their sole task is to maintain and protect all of these seedlings while they wait for the rescue boat to come and pick them up and take them off of the island. While they're there awaiting the rescue boat, a woman washes on shore and enters their lives. This is a book filled with mystery and great familial relationships that are messy and beautiful. It has beautiful, wonderful writing, and I feel like the author is really able to pack so much into this book. I never felt like there were elements that were thrown in or underexplored, and the ending of this book just had me weeping. I genuinely could not stop crying at the end of this book. This book was so beautiful, and it really touched my heart, and I just loved all of the things that it was able to explore in one. Just a piece of art. This book was so well written and everything was so beautifully explored, and I feel like I'm not even doing it justice, but I loved it and you should check it out. In my second place spot for today, I have Intermezzo by Sally Rooney. Intermezzo follows 2 brothers who have recently lost their father as they navigate life and love and occasionally chess. We follow each brother's perspective, and I think they both show 2 very different responses to grief. The older brother shows someone who kind of goes into hyperdrive and tries to control every aspect of his life in order to cope with this change, versus the younger brother kind of relinquishes control and lets life happen to him because he's almost has this feeling of nothing matters because of this change. So it was a really interesting way to explore grief, and the brothers were such phenomenal foils to each other, and I really enjoyed exploring their relationship. So the first brother, who's kind of functioning in overdrive, his narrative almost reads like stage directions. I wanted to try and read some of the text to you, and I can't even pick somewhere to start because it's so fragmented and choppy that wherever you start, you feel like you're intruding on someone's thoughts and inner monologue. And that was a little bit hard to get into at first. As the story evolved and you kind of found your pacing with that narrative style, oh my gosh, it was so impactful. In the moments where he had just these really big feelings or this moment of high anxiety, it was so palpable. I could feel it off the page. And when a book is able to do that, that to me is just a mark of someone who's really talented at their craft. You'll hear a lot of people say that they love Ivan, the younger brother, and he's definitely someone that I want to give a hug and I relate to, and he really does experience so much. But I think that our older brother Peter sometimes gets looked over by readers because he's the one that seems to have it all together. And I think that he can come off a bit blunt or harsh at times. but I think when you have a deeper understanding of why he moves the way he does, he's just as deserving of love as Ivan, even though he isn't as soft around the edges. This is another book that made me cry and cry and cry. I'm gonna read a quote from about halfway through the book that doesn't spoil anything, but you know, if you don't want to know a line from the middle of the book, no hard feelings if you skip over. So Ivan has just spent a day with this woman that he's getting to know, and they're starting to see each other. He had previously been reflecting on one of his final days with his dad, just hanging out at the house. And at the end of this date with this woman, he feels compelled to tell her that he loves her. He says this: "In the week since his father died, Ivan had not heard these words from anyone, 'I love you,' or said them to anyone either. Does this explain his intense longing to hear them, to say them again, to relieve the pressure of this confined force inside his body? Thinking about that day, the dog running for the tennis ball, the pasta that they ate together, the feeling wells up inside him painfully, wanting to say and hear the words again that can never again be said or heard. I'm getting emotional. To return to the house once more and not find it dark and empty, but airy and bright again with open windows. To spend an afternoon together, playing with the dog, eating dinner, doing nothing, only being together just once more." I don't know what captures the feeling of grief more beautifully than missing doing nothing with them and missing those simple days. Absolutely one of my favorite reads of the year. Love, love, love Intermezzo by Sally Rooney. And for my number one book of the year for today, but definitely in my top 3 and a new all-time favorite, I have Lie With Me by Philippe Besson. This is a French translated, teeny tiny little literary piece of potentially autofiction that broke my heart in two, absolutely shattered it into pieces. I read it in one day, I underlined every other word, and I had a friend who read it a few weeks later and came over my house and finished it and cried just as hard as I did. Another fun fact is it was translated by Molly Ringwald, so that's fun. I love that she's pivoted to book translations. We start with a prologue where our narrator, who is an author, is being interviewed at a hotel and he sees a familiar figure walk by. We then jump into part 1 where we follow the first love of 2 teenage boys that were kind of abruptly ripped apart to never see each other again. Part 2, we jump back to the scene from the prologue and discover who that familiar figure was. That's all I want to tell you. It is beautifully written. It is a beautiful story about love for the self, love for others, and it just broke my heart. A very common theme in this top 3 is that I just cried and cried and cried when I read the book. But I love crying. I think it's very cathartic, and this really was such a beautiful book. This and Intermezzo both deal with grief in a way, and I read them both in the first half of the year, and the fact that they both stuck with me so much through the end of the year show that those 2 are so deserving of being in my top 3, and they really have solidified themselves as all-time favorites for me. So that is my top 10 books of 2025. I'd love to hear your favorite book in the comments, or you can leave a little prayer hands emoji to pray for me to have a better reading year in 2026. Thank you so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.